there's the circle saying that I'm going live, and there we go. All right. Hey, what's up? Welcome to Counter Tactics. As you guys are like funneling on in, do your stretches and all that sort of stuff. And while you're doing your stretches, lean down on your phone and click share and, invite your friends to come in and stuff like that. And we'll go ahead and get this, this little video tutorial, if you will, going. And I'll repeat, y'all. I had reservations about doing this because, doing martial arts online, learning martial arts online, not a fan. I remember this has been going on for a while, y'all. Like, I remember the, Black Belt magazine and stuff like that. And you can order like, martial arts videos on VHS. Oh, man, wow, let's go way back. And order these videos from back in the day and study martial arts. But, there's you need that practical approach, y'all. It really helps to have a sparring partner, somebody to go into the lab with, and experiment with this stuff and whatnot. How you guys doing? I see you guys coming in. Thank you guys for showing up for Counter Tactics, my little martial arts ministry that I'm doing. So, but in these times right now, y'all consider what's going on. Hey, why not, share some stuff that I've learned. If you're a beginner, hopefully this video, these videos will be useful to you guys. If you want to explore the martial arts and get into it deeper, they'll help to, seek out a good school, of what it is that you feel that you want to do, what you're feeling and in terms of how you would use your body to defend yourself. Whether it's you want to explore more joint manipulation, if you want to explore more ballistics, using, punches and kicks, or folding the space of your extremities and stuff like that, knees, elbows, close quarter, and all that sort of stuff. And let me say, really, upon saying that, and I'm going to kind of go into this a little bit when it comes to like some other styles. Shouldn't say never, but try not to view a study of the martial arts, in such a box of what you think that the martial art is supposed to be. Like, say, for instance, Wing Chun, right? Wing Chun, as lately, maybe for the past few years, I've seen Wing Chun get a pretty bad rap, like it's ineffective. For a long time, people have deemed Taekwondo as really ineffective too. And a lot of that, y'all, is one, it's in the hands of the students. It's in the hands of the instructor. If I may, I'd like to kind of touch on, and really quick, y'all, we're going to be exploring the forward stance, the hill climbing stance, as it was taught in the, more so in the Shaolin school, they call it the hill climbing stance. Some schools, they'll call it the front stance or the forward stance. We're going to be examining that. But like, say, for instance, like Wing Chun, I think one of the things that gets the Wing Chun artists into trouble is when they see it as a close quarter combat style. My instructor would tell me, he goes, you don't look at whatever system it is that you're studying. Any system can be effective, any system, but it loses its efficacy when you deem it as a close quarter fighting style or a broad reaching fighting style or anything like that. If you view Wing Chun as a close quarter fighting style, then it's useless to you, and chances are you're going to get wrecked. Okay, so when my instructor would teach Wing Chun to me, and we had the mokjo, and we had the dummy and whatnot, we would practice it in phases. Okay, and I'm not a Wing Chun expert, y'all. I'm sort of versed in it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm like, hey, I'm an expert Wing Chun artist. But what was really instilled in me was, don't view it as this close quarter combat style. Okay, you should be able to do it from whatever distance the fight is in. So if your opponent, you read your opponent engages you. Okay, don't feel like you've got to fold and okay, now we're going to do this close quarter Wing Chun stuff. You should be able to, if you can touch your opponent from a distance, you should still be able to execute your movement. You should still be able to enter your opponent's space and have the same potential in your strikes, whether you're from a distance, whether from a medium distance, whether you're close, whether you're on your back, whether you're in the mount or the guard or whichever. The Wing Chun should still be effective to you. But a lot of times in martial arts circle, a lot of people see Wing Chun as this close quarter combat style. And that's what gets the practitioner can get them hurt, being limited to this idea of what it's supposed to be. Okay. I've practiced with grapplers, ground fighters, those who are more in MMA, jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. Have I been choked out? Sure. I had to tap out. But one thing that they did let me know, because I was experimenting, it's like, okay, I'm learning the facet of my curriculum right now is exploring the Wing Chun system. Okay, so we're exploring that. And even they admitted, it's like, man, I'm having a hard time getting a lock on you. What are you doing? Right. So it didn't matter whether we started, we go ahead and start, on our knees, or whether we start up top, whichever you want to start. When they're trying to get that lock on me, okay, I've studied the range of motion and the limitations of that they would have, in their extremities. Your wrist is only going to bend so much before it loses its power. Your elbows, your shoulders and stuff like that. These things that you're trying to get a lock on, Wing Chun is really explored the escape aspect and examine. So, my instructor was a doctor, so he's taking this from a physiological and anatomical point of view. He's looking at it from there to say, okay, the body is going to do, these are the limitations of a person's body. All right. Once you start doing this, their grip is going to weaken. So when the person who's trying to get a grip on me, I'm exploiting those ranges of motions that they're limited to. Okay? That's where the Wing Chun really came in handy, to explore that. And once again, like I said, even when they're trying to get the grip, even the grip was difficult, because they want to come in, they want to get the lapels and stuff like that. But it's difficult when they're trying to get past this guard that's out here. Now they're trying to reach, for my wrists and stuff like that. Wing Chun is good for being able to escape when those are trying to get a hold of your wrist and whatnot. Okay, so they're trying to gain an entry, but it's difficult for them to get past that guard, because I'm not thinking, this short distance. And it's like, no, you got to get past this distance guard right here. And even while you're trying to get in, my hand is this much closer to your head, right? So you're trying to get past this guard. And every time you do, it's like, okay, you're going to run into my hand, right? So it's not like, close quarter, I'm going to do all this close quarter stuff. I don't want to give them the invitation to get that close in the first place. You see what I'm saying? So, and the same thing would apply to, say, for instance, Taekwondo. Keep in mind, y'all, Taekwondo is a sport. All right. It was originally designed for the military. I think General Hong Hai Choi designed it for the military. And then it became more of a sport. Right. So for thinking of it for self-defense, it's not really that. But it doesn't mean that Taekwondo can't be effective. It just depends on how a person is learning it. And a lot of times, a fighter, y'all, that's how they're wired. Right. Like, say, for instance, myself, I don't personally think that I'm wired to be like a fighter. Right. That's why I got to study so much. I really enjoy the martial arts. And to be like a person who's effective in defending himself, I'd really have to study. Other than that, I'm not really wired to be like, yo, man, I'm ready to fight. It's like some people are wired for that. And they could take up, pretty much any system and be more effective with it. Doesn't matter what system. It could be flipping Tai Chi, right? Tai Chi is another thing. A lot of people think that Tai Chi, people are going to get into a fight as a Tai Chi and fight all slow. No, the application of Tai Chi is really fast. You learn it slow, right? Getting all the movements dialed in, learning how to dial up all the aspects of your body to move as one with your opponent, right? And basically, when you apply this stuff, it's fast. But it depends on who your instructor is. You have instructors that teach it for well-being and health and stuff, which is fine, right? But a lot of what's been westernized with it is to teach it for, the health and well-being, when really it's combat. It is combat. You learn it slow. You use it fast. You still got to spar with it. Like real Tai Chi, those who really get into Tai Chi Chuan study fighting with it, and the fighting is fast. All right. So, but a lot of people, they take it and they get a bad rap with it because they become myopic with it, and they don't explore what's really all in it to be an effective martial arts system. I don't snub any martial arts system. I may snub the way that it's taught, but I'm not like, that stuff is BS and it wouldn't work. And so it depends on who's using it, right? A person may beat a person who studies Wing Chun one day and may turn to another person and get beaten by the person who studies Wing Chun, right? My instructor studied with Liu Ting, and Liu Ting was one of Yip Man's lieutenants, right? So, and even when my instructor was there, studying with them, he would spar with those who were doing Wing Chun, learn some great stuff, learn some effective stuff. But he would spar with them, and he would knock them out with left hooks and stuff like that. And they would get mad. He'd be like, "You're not using Kung Fu. You're not using Wing Chun." It's like, look, man, it's Kung Fu to me, right? Because my instructor is primarily a boxer, right? He's a boxer. So when he would box with them, he was just like left hooks all day, bam, right? And so he would be knocking them out and they would get mad. But it depends. Once again, it depends. But people say that, well, boxing is not martial arts. Yes, boxing is martial arts. It's geared for sport, but it's still martial arts. All right. It is the science of hand-to-hand combat. You can be just as effective as a boxer defending yourself as you can be in the ring. All right. So, but anyway, y'all, all that to say, looking at the martial arts, I'm not one of those who say, oh, this martial art is BS and stuff like that. It depends on how deep of a study and discerning a person is with the movements and scrutinizing what the body is doing as it moves through space with your opponent. So anyway, enough of my yammering. Let's go ahead and get into these basics. Last time we studied the horse stance and looking at that. So this time, we're going to examine the next basic stance, and that basic stance is going to be your hill climbing stance. Some systems call it the horse stance. The forward stance. Some call it the front stance. Okay. If you see like systems like Taekwondo, and it depends on what series of Taekwondo it is, because you've got like straight Korean Taekwondo, and then you've got Japanese occupied Taekwondo, and more of the Korean Taekwondo, the stance is taller. Right? I don't know how much of my legs you can see here, but their stance is not that it's not that long for the Korean Taekwondo, but Japanese occupied Korea. The stance was bigger, right? Long stance for Taekwondo. So you depends on which school you see. You might see those two chief differences with their stance. Korea, they're more for the sport, so they'll keep they're studying being like more light on their feet. Whereas with the Japanese, they wanted the stance like bigger, get you really rooted and get you really grounded. When you break down the forward stance, and once again, when we look at it and say, man, how is that going to work for you in a fight? I don't see how you can move that quickly from this long, deep stance that you're in. That doesn't make any sense. All right. Once again, y'all, a lot of schools, when they teach these stances as a stance to train from, as opposed to a stance to actually engage in combat with. Where the front stance comes in, are you gonna like be moving with your opponent? When you get into a fight, are you gonna be like trying to maintain this big old long front stance and trying to fight with your opponent? No, you probably get knocked out. But what's going on in the forward stance, when you use the forward stance, the hill climbing stance, front stance, depends on what school you're in. Let's look at the shape of the stance itself. Okay, we want to make sure the stance is shoulder width apart. And I don't know if you can see my feet. You probably can't see my feet, but my feet are going to be angled, right? One foot, my rear foot is going to be facing as forward as possible. My forward foot is going to be angled in about 45 degrees. That's what my feet are going to look like. This one's inward just a little bit. This one is straight forward. Why is that? That's what we discussed in the last episode. I want to make sure that my muscles are lined up on my opponent. All right. I don't want to have any deviation with my musculature. I want them lined up towards my opponent. So when I move towards my opponent, I want to move to them from point A to point B as fast as possible. So I want those muscles. I want my rear leg, the leg that's going to drive my motion, the leg that's going to take me off running after my opponent. I want it lined up to my opponent. I want my muscles just dialed right towards it. Okay, so that's what we want to look at with this front stance. I want to make sure that there's no deviation there. Okay, so with this front foot forward like this, why is that? The reason why my front foot is going to be angled in a little bit. Actually, before we get there, let's go ahead and talk about that right now. The reason why my foot is going to be angled in a little bit because that's my trap. All right, so let's say we're here. I'm moving with my opponent. Hey, now remember, I'm not going to square off my opponent like this. I'm here, right? I'm in my defensive stance, and what I want to be able to do is if I want to go ahead and close the gate with me and my opponent, I want to be able to shoot in, and I want to trap. I don't know how well you can see this. Remember, my foot's going to be angled in a little bit. I want to be able to move in and trap my foot behind their foot. Okay? Now, from there, I've got them kind of held for a second. So from here, I can go ahead and work whatever inside job, I want to get going to. Because I've got this leg kind of gone in there and hooked. And every time they try to move with me, I can go ahead and, I can sweep, I can get that leg. Okay. But the front stance is supposed to be conditioning you to be prepared to use that foot. So if the gate is closed, if the space is closed between you and your opponent, Now you can go ahead and use that to your advantage and use that foot to lock their foot, right? And every time they try to move it or lift it, you're sensitive. You're moving with them and you're messing with their balance, all right? Your balance stays in check because you're learning to move through space with your back straight. Your axis isn't going and you're not having all this oscillation. You're straight up while they're losing their balance and you're moving and you're checking their foot. That's why with this front stance, the foot is angled in just a little bit. When you move with the front stance, you don't want to just step forward, right? It's not just this kind of like leaning or stepping forward. There's going to be this pattern to it. So see, my hands are going to be like my feet. It's like a C stepping. You're making this crescent step as you go. All right. So it's not just step forward. It's a in and out, in and out. Okay. That was a bad example because I had this way to me. You want to make sure that your body stays straight as possible and your feet travel in and out, in and out. There's this circular step to it. Why is that? Because that's teaching you to get inside, right, your opponent's gate. If their left foot is in front, you want to be able to C-step in and trap around their leg. If it's the other leg, you want to be able to get in, trap around that leg. This sets you up for your throws. So if you see the front stance shift, right, if I go from here, let's say I'm engaged with my opponent, I shift like this. This is your fundamentals getting into your throw, right? So you're in here like this. You've engaged your opponent. You stepped into their center with that front stance. Okay, stepped into their center with that front stance. You want to be able to hook them in right here. And that potential that you have in this leg right here, and with your body, you shift. Now you're in this next front stance. This is facilitating your throw, right? So that's where your front stance comes in very handy like that. And this is just breaking down the fundamentals so you can see it, right? So you can study it. Doesn't mean that, oh, when I get into a fight, I'm going to fight from this front stance and stuff like that. It's like, no, it's still applicable in combat. But when you move, you want to get that circular stance going to be able to engage your opponent, get into their space, right? Using the legs to trap around their legs. When you're going backwards, say if your opponent gets you from behind or something like that, you're using that stance to circle in and out, of their space, being able to upset their balance, using your legs to upset their balance, all right? So when you've got that, let's say it's from, if they got me from, a rear attack, I want to be able to step in and out. Now my opponent is here, okay? And I've got my leg behind them. If my leg is straight like this, now I have this much potential. So if they're here like this, I can ground my opponent just by dropping my leg and dropping my weight, right? So now this leg digs in behind their leg, and I'm going to drop them to the ground. If it's forward, I step in. My leg is bent this much. I've got this much potential in my leg to straighten this much. So with my leg behind their leg, I can turn this, and I've got this much potential to knock their leg out. All right. So these are areas where the front stance comes in very handy. Well, like I said, a lot of schools, when they just teach the front stance as a stance to train like their punches from or train their blocks from. So no, there's combative information in the front stance itself. It's not just a training stance. It's a fighting stance. It just don't, but if you assume that, hey, I'm going to go into a fight using this stance and square off and try to defend myself, trying to use it, it's like, no, this stance it works in transition. When you're transitioning with your opponent and establishing, your setup with your stance, if you're going to go into, if you're in a clinch or something like that, and you've entered your opponent's circle, that's where that stance comes in handy. All right, using that. And that's why you study the fundamentals, you study the form of it. Okay? And then from the form, then you test it out in the lab. And then that's when you're able to, check it and see the applications of that stance. Once again, you want to make sure that your back is straight, keeping that axis consistent, no oscillations and stuff like that, because that's how fights end up going to the ground. A lot of people knock themselves off balance because they don't control their top heaviness, right? They got no foundation. They got no stance. They didn't study their stance. And then they end up on the ground. The opponent didn't even have to drag them down there. They just ended on the ground because they knocked themselves off the balance. You want to study keeping your back straight. This especially is really important for women. If you're studying the martial arts, and I've heard this for years, and it's not that it's not true, but it's one of those things where they'll tell the women, it's like, well, your most strongest attribute is in your leg strength. Your legs is your best weapon and stuff like that. So they tell them, go to the ground and use their legs to defend themselves. It's like, look, if a woman's legs are that strong, then use the power in your legs to stay on your feet. Stay on your feet and train the science of staying on your, and study the science of staying on your feet. Keep your back straight. When you move and you have to defend yourself, don't get into all this isolation. Don't get all top heavy and stuff like that, where you can be taken off your guard. You got to keep your center grounded, keep your back straight, and move through space without all this teetering. You got to keep it straight, because you'll knock yourself off balance when you're trying to throw all that weight and do and whatnot. If you're trying to, scratch his eyes out or whichever and stuff like that, and you throw your weight forward, your momentum will carry you off weight. You'll increase the weight of your arm when you throw it forward or whatnot. So you got to make sure that you have everything grounded and you're well suited, right? So when you speed up and your stance starts to shorten, because that's what happens with speed, things start to shorten, right? So when you start, you still got to make sure that you're grounded and your back is straight. So when you're moving through space, right, you're not over oscillating, and then you're on the ground. Okay. So women, when people tell you that the power is in your legs, use that power in your legs to stay on your feet. Do not get taken to the ground if you don't have to be. If you want to work on your ground game, that's fine. Okay, but if you have to defend yourself, in the streets and stuff like that, it's a lot different getting knocked down to the concrete or asphalt than it is on getting down to a mat. Okay, and getting your head and stuff scraped on concrete and whatnot. All right, you don't want to do that. Stay on your feet if you can do it. There's a science to staying on your feet. So, at any rate, y'all, I hope you guys found that. If you're a beginner, I hope you can find that useful to seeking out a school. For whatever martial arts that you want to study. If you are a seasoned martial artist, I hope that maybe we shared some insight that you find useful, that you want to take into your martial arts study. And one thing that's really important, y'all, is that everybody's a little bit different. I try not to put my personal taste. It happens with every martial artist. I'm no exception. Try not to put my personal taste into whatever it is that I say, oh, this is how it should be, and this is the gospel. I really try to look at it from a physiological point of view. This is like, what, my anatomy is telling me, right? Or what anatomy in general is telling me. It's like in terms of like balance, in terms of maximizing my posture and stuff like that. This is what it's telling me. And I try to go from that, but it's very difficult for any martial artist to take their own personal preference out of anything. But if you're going to teach and you're going to pass on information, try to do your student the service of just teaching them what is truest to the fundamentals that you can, and try not to press your own personal bias into these things, because, combat is a very personal thing, okay? Especially, if you're defending yourself. Because a lot of times when people are getting to a fight, it's personal to begin with. So when they study their fighting, it's going to be a personal preference. It's gotta be your fit. Okay. So when people talk about, what they would do in a fight, that's what they would do. I personally, it would be irresponsible of me to say, well, no, I don't think that would work, because, then we're getting all theory, right? The proof is in the pudding. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't want to get all theory, and I don't want to get all personal about what I would teach a person. I try to come from this from a very, by the book, basic point of view. And when the student has the basic, then they can let their imagination go from there. It's like, okay, you got the basic idea of really how to establish what this is. I'm not trying to impose a style on you. I'm not trying to impose my own mannerism on you and how you would defend yourself. I'm really just trying to give you the basics, right? And then from there, you do you, right? So with that stance, same thing. I'm not trying to tell you, oh, you got to do this and you got to do that and whatnot. I'm just telling you, hey, this is what your body is doing. This is chances are, physiologically, is what is going to be the most maximum and efficient manner to get past, through, or around, however you want to express yourself in combat with, your opponent. All right. So, like I said, to the seasoned martial artist, you may have your preference on doing things, and you're probably very excellent at it. And I hope that, if you're a seasoned martial artist, that you found something useful and say, hey, man, I see some logic in there. I see some logic in your theories. right? And hey, I wouldn't mind trying that, you know, for myself to see if I can maximize and sharpen and economize my movement as I express myself in combat, whether it's sports or whether if you're in an occupation that you know is designed for somebody's personal defense, or if you're a policeman or if you're military or whatnot, you know, hopefully you know, you saw something in this video that you might find useful. All right, y'all. Blessings to you, and you know, just remember, you know, fight. You know, it's about out of you know, hate. You know, it's about, you know, love for what you're defending. All right, rock on.